In this lecture, we'll have a brief introduction to methods. We'll look at what methods are, how they can be defined, how we can call or invoke methods, and we'll have some little practicals on how we can create our own methods. A method is just a collection of statements that perform a specific function. The reason why we need to understand or learn how to create our own methods is because they help us in organizing and simplifying our codes. And when we write using methods, we would be able to reuse our codes if we encounter such a situation where we need to perform a particular operation for which we have already created a method for. So how do we define a method? When you want to define a method, you first of all have to consider some things. For example, what name should you give to your method? And this name should more or less resemble what the method is supposed to do. And what parameters will the method take before it performs a particular operation? After the operation is performed, what will it return? And what will be in the main body of the method or the statements that will perform that function for you. So basically the syntax is simple. You simply start with a modifier and we have the return type. What type of values will be returned after the method fully executes. Then the name of the method, which is what you will be referencing to call that method. The sort of parameters the method will take. And we have the final one, the method body. This is just a list of statements that perform the function you want the method to perform. I will use this simple method to illustrate or explain how methods are defined. So we have a method here that is supposed to find the maximum between two integer values. So we can see in our method there are some modifiers. So the modifiers here, the method first of all is public and static at the same time. And we can see we have a return type for our method as an integer and the name of our method. So the name of our method is max, and max will take the parameters two integers. So there's a first number and a second number, and max will return the maximum between these two. So max has the parameters as two integers, and the parameters together with the name become what is referred to as the method signature. So anytime you want to use maximum, you have to call the name and its parameters. If you call the name without the parameters, you would get an error. So we can see that in between the two curly brackets, we have a set of statements for our maximum method. And as we can see, there is a return type, and the return type is the result. The result has previously been defined as an integer value, which corresponds with the return type in the method header. So when we are programming, we can create our own methods to ensure that our codes are organized well and to ensure that we would be able to reuse our codes for similar purposes in the future. So when we write our own methods, where should the method be? The method can be a separate class file in the same or a different project, or it can be on the same class file as the file with the main class. So we have created our methods and we want to use our methods to perform specific functions or tasks. How do we do that? All you need to do is to mention the name of the method and its parameters. So whenever you want to use the method for a particular function, you first of all need to mention the name and the parameters it will take. So if it's not supposed to take any parameters, you just mention the name with the round brackets. But if it's going to take some parameters, you need to mention the name and the parameters it will take. For example, if we are to find the maximum number between 2 and 9, and we are using the max, which is in our previous slide, to find the maximum, we have to call the name of the method and the parameters it's supposed to take. If you call maximum with just 2 without the 9, there would be an error. So that is how we call or invoke So I will use this simple example to illustrate why we need to write methods in our code. So the problem is to find the sum of numbers within a given range. So we could have a set of ranges, thousands of them. In our case, we just have only 3, where we are supposed to find the sum of numbers from 1 to 10, the sum of numbers from 20 to 37, as well as 35 to 49. So if we do not write with the concept of methods, what is going to happen is we need to write 3 for loops. The first for loop to find the sum, the second for loop to find the sum and print it out, and the third for loop to find the sum and print it out. But we can observe from the 3 for loops that the approach that is used is the same. So basically we can write a method which will be able to do this instead of having to write 3 for loops. If the ranges were 10, then it means we need to write 10 for loops. So let us see what happens if we write our code using methods, how it will look like. So as we can see, for the same problem, we have used less codes to achieve that purpose. For us to do that, we need to write a simple method, and all the method is supposed to do is to find the sum for a given range. In this case, our method has the public and static visibility modifiers, and the return type of our method is an integer. The name of our method is sum, and is only taking a range of numbers from I1 to I2. And what it does is to use the same for loop as we saw previously and simply find the sum and return it for us. So instead of having to write 3 for loops, we only print out the sum 3 times. And as we can see, at each point we are printing the sum of from one range to another. We call the method signature. So as we can see, the method signature is sum, 1, and 10. So this is a range for which it will find the sum of numbers in. And as we can also see in the last one, we are calling the method signature sum 35 and 49. So it simply uses this for loop to find the sum of numbers and prints it out for us. So as we can see, this is how short our codes will be if we employ the method approach when we are coding. This is how long our codes will be when we code without methods. So we go to the practicals and we'll play with how to create our own methods, and most especially we'll learn how to use the refactor in creating our own methods if you're having challenges with the method header or the method signature. To enable us practice with methods in Java, we will first of all create a new Java class file. So we go to the project, to our package, right click, go to new, select class, and we give it a name, practical methods. Select the main method and we click finish. We simply delete the auto-generated codes and we start with our practicals. So for our methods, we are going to follow some steps. We'll first of all create array list, 3 different types of array list, an array list of integers, 2 would be of integers that will store ages and marks, and 1 would be an array list of strings. And we would now write methods that we'll be able to use to find either the ages or the marks, and we would be employing the refactor in that. And we also write a method that will print the content of any type of array list. We will begin with the array list to store integers or ages of students in our class. So we'll create an array list, and during the creation we'll add content to it as well. So we start with the array list and we want it to store integers, and we give it a name, student ages, new, and we want to add the content, during the creation. So assuming we have students with the following ages, so we are seeing errors because we have not imported the ArrayList utility and we have not imported the array utility. So once we are done, the errors go. Since we are going to create another array list of integers to store student marks, we can simply copy the array list of integers to store the student ages and modify the name as well as the content we are adding. So we do that and we would have something like this. So here we change to student marks, and the first student, we are assuming the first student got 78, second student got 59, the third student 80, and the fourth student 92. So again, we would simply copy the array list of integers. Though we will be creating an array list of string, we would copy it and do the modification, let it store string for us as student names. So here we are going to rename it to student names, and we change this to string, and we change these to the names of our students. So we have name, we have Felicity, we have Bettina, and our last student we have Samuelis. So we are done with our array list creation, 3 different array lists. We would now look at how we would be able to write methods to find the sum of ages and marks, as well as to print out the content from all these arrays. Assuming we want to write a method that will find the sum of ages or the sum of marks for students in the 2 array lists, if we know the method signature and the method body, we can simply write it and include the visibility modifiers as well as the return types. But if we have no idea what the method signature is going to be, we can simply write the method body first and use the refactor to extract the method from the method body that we wrote. So in this case, we are assuming we don't know the method signature. We want to use the refactor as a way of extracting our method. So we know we are going to loop through the student ages or the student marks, get each mark or age one by one and add it to something, and that will return for us the sum of the ages or the sum of the marks. So we are simply going to use a for loop to do that, and we use the refactor to extract the method out of that. So first of all, we start by declaring an integer variable to sum the values for us, and we write our for loop. Assuming we are going to use the student ages as our reference or our array list that we want to look through. So we use student ages, the size of it, and inside our for loop, we want that when we are looping through, we should simply pick each item inside the student ages and add it to the sum. So we say sum So this will find the sum for us of ages in the student age array list. So we are going to copy this and paste and modify the name of the array list to the student marks to see what happens if we use the refactor in a particular way. So we simply paste again, and this will make it sum 2, and instead of student ages we change it to marks. And change this one to sum 2. To use the refactor in extracting a method, you first of all need to select the codes that you want in the method body. So for example, this is our method body, a for loop which will sum the ages for us. This is what we want in the method body. So we select it, right click, select refactor, and we pick extract method. In the pop-up that shows, we have the options to modify our method. We first of all need to give it a name, so we call it sum int array, or let's make it int array list to show that it's going to find the sum of content in an integer array list. So we can use the visibility modifiers to change the modifier. At the moment, it is showing in the method signature preview that the visibility modifier is public and static, and the int here tells us it's going to return an integer value for us, and the name of the method is sum integer array list, and it's taking an array list of integer with an integer variable called sum for finding the sum of content in an integer array list for us. So we can also include the generate method comment, or we leave it. Click on OK, and we would see our method created. So we can see our method has been created, and it is created outside the main method. So this is where the main method ends, and this is where our method sum integer array is created. So as we can see, it's going to take an array list of integers and an integer variable called sum, and it will return for us the value of sum. It has simply copied the for loop we wrote to do the sum. So we need to do a bit of modification. We are going to use it to sum general integer array list and not student ages. So we just give it a name, gen, and we copy this. So we are summing for any array list that is an integer. We would be able to use this method to find the sum of content or items in that integer array list. So when we go back, we can see it is saying int sum is equal to 0, and it will return for us sum which is equal to the sum of integer array list. And in this case, we are finding the sum of items in student ages, and we are using the integer variable sum. So we can print it out to see how it goes. So when we run it, we would see what we get. So it's telling us the sum of ages is 86. So it is summing these up, and that is why we get 86. So if we add these 4 ages, you would end up with 86. So let's see if we can use that same approach on the max array list. To do that, we simply declare another integer variable. Let's call it int sum max is equal to 0, and we say sum max is equal to sum. So what array place are we looking at? We are looking for student marks. And what are we using as the variable? We are using some marks as an integer variable. So when we print out the sum marks, we should get an addition of the marks 78 all the way to 93. So here we are printing out some marks. And when we run it, we would get 309, which is an addition of all these marks that we have. So what would have happened if during the selection we included the int sum before we use a refactor? So I would simply copy this one and paste it on that, and we would do a modification. So over here we want to find the sum of student marks, so we change this to student marks, and we change this to student marks, and this is sum 2. So initially we selected only the for loop as what we want in the method body. What happens if we select the int sum as well and use the refactor? So when you right click and hit the refactor, and we go to the method, extract method, in the pop-up we can see it's just taking only an integer array list. There's no mention of an integer variable that is taken. So what happens if we give it a different name, sum int array list new, and we click copy? So as we can see, the second method has also been created, some integer array list, and this is new, so we can have a distinction between these two. So we can observe that this one does not give us any return type because it is using void. Void does not expect anything to be returned. So if we actually want to display the sum of the marks in the array list, we can modify this one by simply printing it out. And here we want to print sum 2. So again, we can change this one. Instead of student marks, we make it general int array, and we copy and paste to replace with the student marks, and we do the same. So when we call this method sum int array list new, and we give it an array list, it will simply print out the sum of that array list for us. So let's see, we've called it here sum int array list new, and we are trying to find the sum of the student marks. So we've printed the student marks and it's 309. If we run it, will we get 2 309s printed? So let's run it and see. So as we can see, 86 is printed out from sum, 309 printed out from system.out, but the second method we are using, sum int array list, is what is printing the third 309 for us. So depending on how you select the codes and use the refactor, you would get different methods generated for you. So what if we know the method signature, we know the method body, and we want to write it ourselves? How do we go about that? So we'll copy this one and paste it outside the main method, and we would write a method that will print the content of array list irrespective of what type it is, whether it's an integer array list, an array list of string, or an array list of double. So we start with public. We want our method to be accessible, and we want it to be accessible inside static methods, and we are using the generic form and we want it to return a string for us. And the name of the method is to print individual items in the array list, and it's just taking a parameter of an array list or a generic type of an array list. So over here we type array list, generic type, and we call it generic array list. So we can see there is an error, and that is because we've not included a return statement, and we don't want our method to return anything. We want it to return null. So the error goes now. So we simply use a for loop that for any given generic array list, loop inside that array list, get each item and print it out, and that will be the end of our method. So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than generic array list dot size I plus. So all we want to do is to print out each item at index I. So we simply say system dot out, and for each index I, get the item at that index and print it out for us. Get index, and our index is I. So this method should print the content of any type of array list, whether it's integer, string, boolean, or drop-off. So let us see if it works. Assuming we want to print out the content in the student names, so we simply call the method name is print items, print individual items. So we copy that and we paste print individual items. What is it taking as the parameter? It's taking an array list. And what's the name of the array list? We want to print the student names. So when we run it, it should print the student names line by line. So we run it, and we can see me has been printed, Felicity and Bettina. We can likewise use it to print the items in the student age or the student mark array list. So we change this to student age, and we add another one to print student marks. So we'll simply print an empty line in between to separate the printout. So we are just printing empty lines, and when we run it, that same method, print individual items in the array, has been used to print the individual items in a string array. It's been used to print the individual items in an integer array and the individual items in another integer array. So we need to learn some other things. What happens if the method we are dealing with is not in the same file as the main Java class file? So we want to copy these methods, take them out, and put them elsewhere so that our main class file will have just some few lines of code without these methods. If these methods are in a different class or in a different file, how do we access them? So we first of all go to our project, and in the package we go to new, and we select new Java class file. And here, let us call it methods, or let's call it main methods. We don't select the main, public static void main, we don't select that, and we click finish. So let's go back to our practical methods and we cut all these methods we've created. We cut it, there are errors, and we come to paste them here. So once we've cut the methods from the main Java class and we've pasted them here, we realize there are errors in our main class file called practical methods. So how do we deal away with these errors? Because the main method is in the same folder as the practical method, we can simply say main method dot some integer array list, and that will take the error away. So over here we simply need to say main methods dot, and the error is gone. So we simply copy main methods dot and we paste it to remove all the errors. And that will take all the errors away. When we run it now, we would get the same results we got previously. So that is the case when the methods are in the same package as our main Java class file. If they are not in the same package, you need to use import, the name of the package, and the name of the method before you would be able to access them. So we are done with our introduction to methods. It's time for assignment. So for assignment, students are supposed to do the following: create a 4x3 dimensional array of doubles and add content to the array. And you write a method to find the average of all values in the array, and write another method to print the content of the array. So if you have no idea of the method signature, just simply write a for loop that will be able to find the average of all the values in the array, and we use the refractor to extract the method out of that. So I think this is going to be an easy work for you.